Welcome to your Everyday Life podcast with words of encouragement. We hope that you walk away today in your everyday walking around kind of life, feeling energized by the words of encouragement you are about to hear. Each week, the message will inspire you in your plain old ordinary life. Knowing that Jesus is there with you every step of the day and not somewhere far off will give you new perspectives of your daily life. You can find us online at youreverydaylife.org. Go there and subscribe so you can get new weekly devotional blog posts in addition to the many posts on site. So be encouraged in your everyday life. And now, here are your hosts, Scott Ramsey and his wife, Carmen.
I'm your host, Scott Ramsey, and this is my co-host, my lovely, wonderful wife, Carmen. Hi, Carmen.
Aw, you're so sweet.
I know.
You're too
Well,
much.
welcome to our podcast, Your Everyday Life. This is our introduction. And so we're so excited to be able to kick this off and to have you as one of our viewers today. And we're so excited about what all we're going to be able to do with this. So today we thought, just as an intro, we'd take some time for you to introduce ourselves to you, for you to get to know us a little bit and talk a little bit about our past life and what that means as far as where we are currently and how that all came about and how that all relates to doing a podcast. Sound good, Carmen?
Sounds good.
All right. So let's talk about where we first met or how we first met. What do you want to say?
Well, we actually met online.
Yes, we did.
Scandalous, I know. That was back in December of
Well, our first,
2003.
yes. And matter of fact, the first time that we met in person was December 13th, 2003, but we had connected online a little bit before that as we started to get to know each other. So that wasn't real popular back then.
No.
But at least I was. I don't know what circles you were running in, but I wasn't running in the circles where I was going to meet, very many people that because of my job, because of where I was in life. And, I didn't go to bars and hang out and go to different places like that. So I wasn't interested in meeting people there. So anyway, we met online.
Online's just another place to
it's just another place to meet.
meeting someone. So
yeah.
what's funny
go ahead.
is that I had just put my bio up. I didn't have a picture yet. And then I get this notification from this guy. And he's like, I don't normally respond to profiles without pictures, but I liked what yours said. And I was like, intriguing.
Yeah. So at that point, I had 7 one-time dates from connections I had made online. I had this rule that, hey, when you meet in person, you only meet for like a half hour, maybe up to an hour. You have maybe a drink and some appetizers, and then you part ways. That way you're not stuck with somebody you don't feel like you connected with, right? But if you do connect, that's okay. You still part ways, and then you reconnect after that if there was something there. So it was going nowhere. And then here's Carmen's profile. Matter of fact, you didn't have a picture. I think you just mentioned that. And so I was like, by the way, do you happen to have a picture?
Yeah, he kind of just like slid that in there because he wasn't, his catch line or I forget, was his title was like, not your everyday Joe or not your average Joe or something like that.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, one time, the reason why I asked for a picture is because one time I was catfished. The lady that showed up, I thought it was somebody's grandma. I know that sounds bad, but it was like, that's not who you made yourself out to be when we met online. So anyway, I asked Carmen, do you have a picture? And so she sent me this picture.
Yeah, but at which point I'm at work, sorry to say, but I leaned over to my friend because we went out the weekend before with some friends and said, hey, do you have a picture of us? She's like, sure. So when I sent that picture to Scott, I was sure to clarify I was not the 6 foot tall, blonde haired, blue eyed gal, which, by the way, worked out really well for me because he's into short brunettes.
Yes, perfect. And so then we connected after we got to know each other a little bit. And I was able to check some things off on my list that fit what I was looking for. And
you had a grocery list.
Seriously. Yes, I did.
You
Yeah.
did.
And so then we meet in person, and remember it's December 13th, so Christmas is coming up. So we meet in a sporting goods parking lot. It's an hour and a half away from where I lived. So it was quite the drive. But I get there, and she's in her vehicle in the parking lot. She told me the description. So I walked up. She's looking down at her phone or something. So I knock on her window, and she looks up and takes my breath away. I think my heart stopped beating for a couple of moments, because at that moment I just thought, oh, I'm so far out of my league here. And so I just thought, well, this is going to be another one-time deal, because there's just no way she's going to want to be with somebody like me. So anyway, and I think a lot of guys can probably relate to that, because most guys do marry up. So, and I certainly did in my case. But so then we go in. Can I tell the story? How we go in?
Yeah.
So she's there on a mission to buy a
100-pound punching bag.
for her own Christmas. Yeah. And
I
so
was
we
single.
go. So we go into the store, and she buys this 100-pound punching bag, and then this big brute of a guy that works there is carrying this punching bag out on his shoulder like this, walking it out to her car for her, while this little guy behind her that's on this date with her is like, oh, that punching bag's too big for me to carry.
Always tell it that way, but it was not like that
That's
at
how
all.
I felt. That's how I felt. I was like, I am not making a good impression here. So anyway, we then. By the way, you always like to mention this, that I broke all of my rules on that
You
date,
did.
because
You did.
we went across the street to Don Pablo's, and had some drinks together, and we sat and talked probably way more than an hour, probably a couple of hours. Then we decided, hey, let's go see a movie, and which broke another rule, right? That, no, we're going way too long here. But I was like, okay, this is going well. Let's keep going. So then we go to the movie, and she is so into the movie and focused on it that I'm thinking, oh, I've lost that connection. She's decided, okay, we're done talking. I'm here for this movie now, and then we'll go our own way. And I'm going like, hey, well, that was a funny scene, wasn't it? And kind of looking at her, and she's just not even looking at me. She's just focused
You
on
were
that
talking
movie.
to me during the movie? I literally had
No.
no idea. But hey,
Yeah.
if we're gonna pay for a movie, I'm gonna watch the movie.
Oh my
Which
goodness. Yeah.
which I loved. It was Love Actually, so that's like our movie now.
Yeah. It was a Christmas movie that came out at that time. So
You know what that
anyway,
also wait, what that also
what?
reminds me of? What our song is, even though there's another song that plays into this. But every time Scott and I would get into our car, what is it? Shake It Like a Polaroid Picture, Outcast. And I
Outcast.
know it's
Yeah.
probably one of the least romantic songs ever, but like we joked every time we got around each other,
Yeah, it
that
was
song
our
was
song.
playing. So anyway, I
Yeah.
digress. Sorry.
Yeah. So that's how we met. And so, part of how all this has spun out of our relationship, because Carmen and I are like two peas in a pod. We love doing everything together. We have fun together. We there's not very much we don't do together, and we actually, we had our own business together for 15 years before we sold that, as we moved down here to Florida from Indiana. And so, but part of that was when we got married 6 months later after we met in person, right? June of 2004. Up to that point, I have to mention this first. So back up a little bit. This book was introduced to me by an earlier mentor in my life, Greg Telly. And Greg Telly introduced me to this book, Living with Jesus Today by Juan Carlos Ortiz. And so that really impacted my life, because this guy in this book talks about this relationship like it's a real relationship. And I was like, wow, that's just, that's kind of cool that you can have a real relationship with Jesus like that in your everyday life. And he used everyday examples, and that really impacted me. And so then fast forward to Carmen and I getting married. And so, I put together this little wedding song tape. This was back when cassettes were still around, right? I think. And so one of the songs I put on there was by Rascal Flatts, this Everyday Love, because it talked about that everyday kind of love life that some people have. And I felt like that described our life. And, having coffee together, and Carmen putting her arms around me and kissing, from behind and kissing me on the cheek, and hanging together and take walks together and all those kind of things. That's just an ordinary part of our life. That's what it's kind of like what we expect out of our relationship. It's just that natural and that close. And so those two things together, living with Jesus every day and that ordinary kind of life, is how I envision our walk with Christ being, which thus, is the name of the blog post and now this podcast, Your Everyday Life, about how Jesus is there every step of the way with us. And he desires to have that close and that personal of a relationship with us and impact us in that way. So that's kind of how everything spun out of our relationship and us meeting.
Well, Scott, I know through this podcast that we're going to be interviewing people. We're going to be talking to them and hearing their stories about how they, how they had a relationship with God, where he met them, what that looks like for them. And in saying that, I feel like we kind of need to share that part of our story as well. So for me, again, when Scott and I first met, our second date, we're at Starbucks.
You had to go there.
And he gets this so serious look on his face. And we're sitting on this little couch and he faces off toward me and he takes both of my hands in his hands and he looks me right in the eyes and he says, I'm an ordained minister. And then I looked at him and he's like, I normally wait longer before I tell, someone this.
I didn't want to scare you away.
I know. And I'm like, you're a man, right? You put your pants on one leg at a time. And he was like, and then this just goes to show you like where I was. Like God wasn't even on my radar. I said, good, you're my way into heaven. And, that's where we started.
And at that time, that was pretty much where I was too at that point in my life, because I was pretty jaded because of some things that had happened in my life, and I blamed God's people for my attitude and where I was, and if people really knew what happened, they would understand why I feel like I feel, and that's how I justified all that, So there was some, we still had a great relationship. God was using some things there and forming some things in us that when it finally came to a point, and if you want to share this briefly, Carmen, about, just before you went on your Nicaragua trip, that missions trip with our church and how that all came about.
So Scott and I have been married for quite a few years at this point, and I'd met this wonderful now friend, Eleanor, through Scott. And she invited me out. She's like, hey, you want to go to the brewing company and have a cocktail and an appetizer? And I was like, sure, And here we are sitting in the middle of this and on a weekend, this brewing company. But we're in this little 2-seater, like their barrel seats, pretty cool. And we're just talking. And it's just this really intimate conversation between her and I. And one thing leads to another. And it wasn't like she says, let's talk about God now or anything like that. In fact, God was never even mentioned, but he was there. And she asks me, do you want to do this? And I knew what she meant. And I accepted God that day. I accepted him into my life. And after that, she invited me to a mission trip to go to Nicaragua. And I was like, yes, I was just waiting for God's next yes, I want to go. And my first time in Nicaragua, I was raw. I don't know how else to say it. My heart was just shredded and I was bare and just so awake. And I remember crying all the way home on the plane, just not bawling but still just uncontrollably, just tears flowing.
Yeah. And you actually gave me a little bit of warning, like, hey, I'm going to be coming home and my heart is just broken wide open. And, I have to just share this quickly here because I know we need to come to a close, but I remember being so proud and so jaded of who I was supposed to be and who I was trying to portray this image of, that I was really embarrassed that somebody else had to introduce you to Christ like that. And here I am, your husband, and I had that walk, and I strayed so far from it and been so jaded that all took place right underneath my own life, my own nose. And so she comes back from this trip just with her heart wide open, and that just really affected my heart and broke my heart open. And that's really where a turning point for me came as well. And so, when we look at all that took place and how God orchestrated all that and knew what he needed to do, obviously people were praying for us, because you pray for people to come across other people's paths that need to be open to what God wants to do in our life. And he certainly did that in a big way for us at that point. And so at that point, our relationship continued to grow. God, fulfilled some dreams in our hearts with where we are now and what we're doing. And so as we look at what we want to be able to do with this podcast and with the blog post, is simply for other people to meet others in their everyday walk with Christ, because we can all relate to different people, and we'll talk about different topics and interview these guests that will be able to share what their everyday life with Jesus looks like, and we'll all be able to relate to that. So, Carmen, is there any last words you want to be able to share in closing here?
No, just that I guess there is. I'm excited to be taking this walk with you in this next step. And I'm loving seeing how God is using you. And I am so looking forward to hearing other people's stories.
Yeah. So as we jump into this, how you're going to be able to follow us is you can simply go to Your Everyday Life. Let me say that again, youreverydaylife.org. And that's the website for the blog posts. And you can see a link for our podcasts on there. And you can also have the opportunity to subscribe when you go to the website. That way you can get an email that will also have the link to the podcast as well as to the blog posts, and be able to learn and see and hear more from other people about that everyday walk that will be encouragement to you, words of encouragement in your everyday life, because that's what Jesus wants to do. He wants to be that encouragement. He wants to be a blessing to you, and we want to be a blessing to him in that walk, in that everyday life. So that's what this is all about. So we're looking forward to connecting with you as we begin to launch this new adventure in our life. So thanks for being with us today, and we look forward to connecting with you next time.
Thanks for seeing us.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us this week on Your Everyday Life podcast. We pray that you were encouraged. Make sure to visit our website at youreverydaylife.org, where you can subscribe and receive weekly devotional blogs from Scott. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Your Everyday Life. Be sure to give us a comment on how words of encouragement has inspired you, and pass the word on to a friend who you know needs encouragement. Be sure to tune in again next week, when once again we will look at everyday life topics and apply words of encouragement. Until then, stay encouraged by what you heard today, and may you be greatly blessed.